Minecraft speedrunning can be very complex. Originally, it was actually quite the opposite. Speedrunners would just play the game casually, but with better mechanics to try and get a good time. Slowly, this has developed to where some of the game's hardest features and even bosses have been completely rethought and oftentimes broken. In this second video, I would like to break down one of the most optimized portions of the game. One which in concept seems so simple, but can really be broken down to a series of math equations. In this video, I would like to talk about Stronghold travel. For any casual players, there is really only one way to get to the Stronghold, and that's the way Mojang originally intended us to use. By throwing an Eye of Ender, we will be pointed in the direction of the Stronghold. Periodically, after running for a while, we can throw another Eye of Ender to see if it goes backwards or not, and eventually, we can pinpoint where we should dig down to find the structure. For speedrunners, this is a no-go, as all this time spent throwing eyes and backtracking to find the location is precious time lost. Fortunately, there's actually quite a few ways runners have broken down this idea into a form of math equations to find the location of the Stronghold, often only throwing a few eyes. This is Triangulation. For those in pre-calculus, this term is probably pretty familiar by now. And yes, unfortunately for speedrunning Minecraft, there is actually quite a bit of math that goes on in the runner's head while completing the game. Triangulation is determining the exact location of a point by measuring angles from two other points that you already know. By opening our F3 menu, we can actually see the exact angle we are facing. By throwing an Eye of Ender at point A and marking down what the angle is, then traveling 14 blocks in either direction to the right or left, and finally throwing second Eye of Ender, we can give ourselves enough information to figure out the distance and direction of the Stronghold. By finding the difference in the angles, and then using a cheat sheet, we can determine how far away the Stronghold is. This way we know whether it's too far for us to continue on with the run, or we can also use this information to save our eyes from breaking. This strategy is a very common one. It has been used in many top-level runs, and is still often performed today. This does not mean, however, that it's the most useful form of travel, just the most convenient. Under certain circumstances, we can actually cut down this travel time by 1/8. Now, this is a very odd and specific number, but that comes with reason. Minecraft has 3 different dimensions: the overworld, nether, and end. The overworld and end are connected only by the use of end portals, which are found at specific locations around the map. Every single portal takes you to the same end island and spawns you in the exact same place. The nether and overworld, however, have a different connection. When you build a portal in the overworld, your coordinates of the portal in the nether will be divided by 8. This flips around when building one in the nether, as the coordinates in the overworld will be multiplied by 8. We can actually use this to our advantage, as long as we are given the correct materials and circumstances. This is educated travel. For materials, the only extra thing a runner needs is more obsidian. Usually, the minimum requirement for a single blind travel is 10, but since we are going to be making 2 portals, we will need at least 20. After we have built a forced portal, perform the exact same steps as done in normal triangulation. This time, however, instead of traveling to the Stronghold in the overworld, we can hop back into the nether portal and do our travel there. By dividing the distance we need to travel by 8, we can find the nether coordinates which will take us close to the Stronghold. Once here, we can build a second nether portal and find ourselves right by, or sometimes even inside of the Stronghold itself. The only time this strategy could be slower than a normal single blind travel portal is if the nether terrain is bad. Unfortunately, this is quite likely to happen. The nether generates in an odd way, with lots of netherrack both on the floor and ceiling. Oftentimes, these two will generate close enough together that they will completely block our way, creating a wall we have to dig through or go around. But if the area looks clear, the strategy can actually save tons of time for Stronghold travel. One of the benefits of making 2 portals is it doesn't matter where we make the first. In Java Edition, Strongholds generate in rings, with 3 spawning in the first one. Usually, while creating a portal, the runner makes sure that their nether coordinates are an eighth of the optimal places for the stronghold to spawn, usually somewhere near the center of these rings. With educated travel, we can actually make our portal in a place that is completely outside of the ring. This does mean that we're going to have a decent amount of nether travel to do, but it is better than traveling to a random place in the ring, making a portal and just discovering that you went in between two strongholds, about 2,000 blocks away from each. In the next form of travel I would like to talk about, we're going to have to perform a lot of math. This strategy is probably one of the most complicated and confusing strats to fully understand in Minecraft speedrunning as a whole. In this strategy, we take a look at how different objects generate relative to each other, even when they may seem unrelated and very far away. This is divine travel. Divine travel is performed by taking a generated object in the 0,0 chunk of the overworld or nether and using it to determine where the stronghold could theoretically spawn. That's right, we can actually gather a bit of information from a block or entity and use it to determine what the final destination of the game should be. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to be explaining how one may use fossils to perform the strategy, as that's the most common occurrence, but it can also be performed with other objects such as trees and even animals. When the 1.16 Nether update first released, it introduced multiple new Nether biomes, one of them being the Soul Sand Valley. This biome has a few quirks to it. Mob spawns are higher in this area, evidently shown by the massive increase in blazes and withers found in the fortress, alongside the addition to Nether fossils scattered around the landscape. For a casual player, these fossils are usually just used as decoration, or sometimes for bone meal in their farms. But for speedrunners, we use it for a much more interesting and complicated purpose. First, the fossil has to be found in the 0,0 chunk. Any other place and it won't work. Fossils are categorized into 5 different sections: flat, single rib, multiple ribs, cage, and closed cage. Within these categories, we can list every single type of fossil that can be generated. By using a cheat sheet, we can see what block of the fossil we need to look at. Opening an F3 menu, we can find the target block section, which will display a number somewhere from 1 to 15. Once we have determined this number, we can use another cheat sheet to find out what sets of coordinates are associated with it. Each number has 3 different coordinates, one for each likely location for a stronghold to spawn within the first ring. For example, if we were to get the number 10, we can look at the sheet and see that we need to travel to one of these locations. -142, -213, +255, -17, or -113, +230. All we need to do is find the closest set of coordinates once we want to leave the nether, and try our best to get as close we can to this location. This is a strategy that we used to get Brentilda the 1.16 world record, alongside the first and only sub 10 minute run in the game's history of this category. For him, he was lucky enough that the coordinates he went to come right inside of the stronghold, only one room away from the portal. Now, this strategy is confusing to learn, but it is even harder to understand why it works. I will try to do my best to give a simple explanation of how the strategy is possible, but if you would like a fuller, more complicated description, please watch this video by the creator of the strategy, Matthew Bolin. Link in the description. When deciding how to generate a world, the game looks at the numbers given in the seed. When it wants to create something like a fossil, it uses these numbers to find out where to place it alongside many other details. This being said, if we can find this fossil and some specific details about it, we are able to reverse engineer this process until we are left with a number. This number is also responsible for where the stronghold generates. By gathering enough information from the fossil, we can figure out with some leeway where the stronghold is going to spawn. The reason we have to have 3 sets of coordinates to choose from is because the game generates 3 strongholds in the first ring. This means that every set of coordinates is going to let us blind travel close to the stronghold, at most only 800 blocks away. As you already know, every blind travel takes a lot of luck. Even with divine travel, you could still spawn in a cave under a difficult to navigate biome, and then have to travel 800 blocks only to dig down right on top of a mountain. However, for the final 2 strategies, this shouldn't be a problem. For both of these, if performed correctly, you should be able to perform triangulation in such a way that it is so accurate, your second blind will hit the stronghold every single time. This is axis calculated and perfect travel. First, axis calculated. This strategy, first developed by Ninja Brain, uses a form of triangulation which is much more consistent than its predecessors. It starts just like many other strats do, with your first nether portal. This time, however, we need to keep track of what block the runner is standing on when inside the portal. Once in the overworld, the runner needs to open their chunk borders by hitting a combination of F3 and B. Next, they run over to the nearest corner and build up a few blocks if there are any objects obstructing their view. Once they are in the very corner of the chunk, the runner throws an eye, turns down their FOV, and opens the F3 menu to get the precise angle of the eye. The next thing the runner needs to do is throw a second eye. Usually this would be done by running 4.5 jump sprints 90 degrees in either direction. The only problem with this is unless the terrain is completely flat, this isn't going to be a very consistent method. Instead, the runner looks at the yellow lines formed by the chunk borders, and by mirroring the placement of their crosshair in between the lines, you can turn 90 degrees much more consistently than performing mental math like in normal triangulation. Next, the runner travels one chunk over to the spot and throws a second eye, retrieving the angle once again. Now, here's where the use of mental math comes in. The first thing needed to be done is finding the difference between your two angles. This number is once again correlated with the cheat sheet. Although there are many numbers on the sheet, for the simplest form of axis calculated travel, all we need to do is focus on the difference between the two angles and the nether coordinates we wrote down earlier. By taking our x coordinate and adding this number, we found the exact spot on which you will need to travel to make your second portal. With axis calculated, you don't actually need to find the other coordinates. Instead, take this first angle that you got and line up exactly with it in the nether. Travel until you reach the x coordinate and your z coordinate should line up as well. Finally, all that's left to do is make your second portal and hopefully hit the Stronghold. The only two problems with this strategy is if your nether terrain is not optimal, it is hard to keep your angle and you'll have to estimate a bit on where exactly your z coordinate should end up. On top of this, it does require a bit of mental math, and according to the current rule set, all pauses count towards the runner's final time. But as long as you're good at mental math or have some smart chatters, this shouldn't be a problem. This still leaves perfect travel, and if you couldn't guess by its name, this is the most consistent way to always hit the Stronghold, every time. This strategy requires a lot of detailed specifics while being performed. It even includes the resolution of your monitor. For this video, I'll be sharing an example done with the 1920 by 1080 resolution, while on full screen mode. This strategy starts very similar to axis calculated, where you find the corner of a chunk. This time, however, we need to make sure we're at the 0, 0 coordinates of that chunk. With borders enabled, place 2 blocks in the very corner to create a pocket for your player to go against. This is done to make sure you are in the exact same spot every single time you perform this strategy. Next, throw your eye, turning down your FOV to 31. Go to Controls, Mouse Settings, and turn your sensitivity all the way down. By tapping the pause button while moving your mouse, we can slowly move our crosshair to a very specific spot in the eye. We want the right side of our vertical line to be parallel with the left pixel of the pupil. Now, by pressing F3 and C, we can get an accurate angle reading in the chat box. If we look at the eye itself, one of the 3 middle pixels will be slightly wider than the others. Depending on which pixel of the eye is widest, we need to perform a simple math equation. If the eye has its left side wide, subtract 0.01, middle wide, add 0.01, and right wide, do nothing. Now, by using a cheat sheet, we can find our number and associate it with some coordinates. This will give us 2 numbers. By adding the first 2 numbers together and the second 2 numbers together, we can find the precise chunk which the Stronghold generates it. Now, to convert these chunk coordinates for nether travel, all you need to do is double these 2 numbers, and these will be the coordinates you need to travel to. Finally, you can go back to the nether and make your second portal, right into the Stronghold. That's all of the different types of common Stronghold travel used in speedrunning. But there's still one more topic I'd like to quickly cover. Recently, the moderators on speedrun.com have unbanned the use of calculators for Stronghold travel. This means that many of the strategies are obsolete, unless the runner chooses not to use one of these calculators. Although I totally understand how this new introduction to speedrunning will certainly help, and I'm not specifically for or against them myself, it does seem as though some of the hard work of the community has been lost, which is quite a shame. That's all I have for you in this video, and I look forward to the next one.